The wind at the rail depot cut through Vernon Calhoun's coat like a knife through butter. 5 in the morning, January cold, and the freight car door handle was slick with frost. He pried it open with stiff leather gloves, his breath white clouds in the lamplight. Inside, curled against a pile of burlap sacks, lay a child. A girl, maybe 7, her lips tinged blue. Pinned to her coat collar was a scrap of paper, one word scrawled in charcoal, "Unwanted." Vernon lifted her. She weighed nothing. As he carried her through the town square toward Doc Sawyer's house, he heard the boarding house porch creak, Ruth Kimball's voice, low to the merchant beside her, "Old fool's playing hero again." Doc met him at the door, took one look and said, "Pneumonia. She needs $18 worth of laudanum." Vernon had 9. Doc Sawyer's kitchen smelled of old coffee and carbolic acid. Vernon laid the child on the table near the stove, and Doc moved fast, peeling back her coat, pressing 2 fingers to her throat, counting under his breath. The stove's iron belly ticked as it heated, and Vernon heard the girl's breathing, shallow and wet. "She's been out there hours," Doc said. He mixed laudanum with honey in a tin cup, tilted her head back, got 3 spoonfuls down her throat before she coughed. "Maybe all night." Vernon pulled 3 silver dollars and 6 coins from his pocket, laid them on the counter, $9.40. Doc glanced at the money, then at Vernon. "Keep it, you'll need it for food." "Can't take charity, Doc." "It ain't charity if I'm deciding." Doc wrapped the girl in a wool blanket, settled her near the stove. "She'll need watching. Fever's gonna spike before it breaks." Vernon stood there, hat in his hands, feeling the weight of 58 years and no clear answer. The girl's face was small, dirt-smudged. Her hair, copper-colored where it wasn't matted, reminded him of something he couldn't name. Then she hummed, faint, half-conscious, a tune he hadn't heard in 3 years, his wife Clara's lullaby, the one she used to sing while kneading bread. "Vernon," Doc said quietly, "you hear that?" Vernon nodded, didn't trust his voice. Might be coincidence. Might be, but it wasn't, and they both knew it. By morning, the girl was breathing easier. Doc had kept her through the night, and Vernon had ridden back to his ranch in the dark, 5 miles of frozen road and too many thoughts. When he returned at dawn, Doc had her sitting up, sipping broth. "She's got a name," Doc said. "Asked her twice. Says it's Iris." Vernon crouched by the chair. "Iris, I'm Vernon. You're safe now." She looked at him with eyes the color of summer sky. Clara's eyes, he realized with a jolt. "Where's Mama?" The question sat in the room like a stone. Vernon didn't have an answer that wouldn't break something. "Don't know, child, but you're safe." She nodded, too tired to argue. Vernon's ranch was a day's quiet. Chores and wind and the sound of his own boots. He set Iris in Clara's old rocking chair near the hearth, tucked a quilt around her. She watched him move through the room, fetching firewood, stirring the stew pot, not saying much. Mid-afternoon, Ruth Kimball arrived with a basket of supplies, bread, dried apples, a jar of preserves. She set them on the table, glanced at Iris, then at Vernon. "You keeping her?" "Till she's well." Ruth folded her arms. She was 52, a widow herself, and she didn't waste words. "County assessor's coming in March. Family continuity review." Vernon frowned. "What's that mean?" "Means they check if a homestead's got family living on it. Bloodkin or legal adoption. Widowers without heirs, they sometimes lose their land." "That's a damn fool law." "It's territorial law," Ruth said. "Been on the books 2 years. You ought to know about it." Vernon stared at the fire. He'd heard rumors, but figured it didn't apply to him. He had the land, the deed, 22 years of work in the soil. "You saying I could lose this place?" "I'm saying you ought to be careful." Ruth's voice softened. "I lost my husband's claim last year. Same law. Pettigrew handled the paperwork." Silas Pettigrew, the county land registrar. Vernon had seen him at town meetings, slick-talking, always smiling, always with an answer that sounded right until you thought about it too hard. "I'll figure it out," Vernon said. Ruth nodded, started to leave, then paused at the door. "Vernon, that girl, she looks like Clara. You see it?" "I see it." After Ruth left, Vernon sat in the other chair, watching Iris sleep. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. He thought about Clara, about the house fire 3 years ago, about the fact that he'd been at the market in Cheyenne when it happened. 20 miles away, selling cattle, while his wife burned. He'd saved one thing from the fire, their homestead certificate, signed in 1861. The edges were charred, the ink smudged, but it was legal. It was proof. He kept it on the mantel, next to Clara's Bible. Iris stirred, opened her eyes. "Where's Mama?" she asked again, her voice small and lost. Vernon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Don't know, child. But I reckon she wanted you safe. That's why you're here. Iris looked at him for a long moment, then closed her eyes again. Vernon sat back, feeling the ache in his chest, the kind that didn't come from work or cold, but from something deeper. He didn't know who this child was or why she'd been left at the depot, but he knew one thing. He wasn't leaving her to the county wagon, not after hearing Clara's lullaby in her voice. February came with a town meeting at the courthouse. Vernon didn't want to go, but Ruth insisted. You need to hear this, she'd said. Pettigrew's making an announcement. The courthouse square was packed, 40, maybe 50 people, crowding the steps and spilling into the street. The air smelled of wet wool and tobacco smoke. Vernon stood near the back, hat pulled low, trying to stay invisible. Silas Pettigrew climbed the courthouse steps, his boots loud on the wood. He was a lean man, sharp-featured, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He held up a sheaf of papers. Good people of this territory, he began, his voice carrying. I'm here to inform you of a review process. Territorial Code, Section 412. Any homestead without documented family continuity is subject to county assessment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vernon felt his jaw tighten. Pettigrew continued. This law has been on the books 2 years, meant to prevent land speculation, keep homesteads in the hands of working families, but it also means... He paused, let the silence build. Widowers without heirs, spinsters without kin, they got to prove family residency, blood relation, or legal adoption. Otherwise, the land reverts to county control. A voice from the crowd. What happens to the land? Gets resold, fair auction, revenue goes to territorial development. Vernon's stomach turned. Fair auction. That meant Pettigrew's friends, the railroad investors, the men with money. Pettigrew shuffled his papers. Already processed 3 cases last year. Benjamin Hollis lost his claim in June. Samuel Turner, August. And he looked directly at Ruth. Thomas Kimball, September. Ruth's face went pale. Vernon knew Thomas Kimball had been her husband, knew he'd died 2 years back, leaving Ruth with a boarding house and no children. Someone called out, "How much notice they get?" 60 days, standard procedure. Vernon's hands clenched. 60 days to prove something that shouldn't need proving. Pettigrew scanned the crowd, his gaze settling on Vernon. And I see we've got another case pending. Vernon Calhoun, widower, no documented heirs. Took in a child recently, charitable no doubt, but charity ain't family under the law. Every head turned. Vernon felt the weight of 50 eyes, heard the whispers starting. He stepped forward. That girl's my kin. Pettigrew's smile widened. Then you'll have no trouble providing documentation. Birth records, marriage certificates, proof of relation. I'll get it. You've got 60 days, Calhoun. Clock starts today. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Vernon turned and walked away, his boots heavy on the frozen ground. Behind him, the murmurs grew louder. That evening, Ruth showed up at Vernon's door. She didn't wait for an invitation, just walked in and set a worn leather journal on the table. Found this last week, she said. Your wife's diary. She'd loaned it to me before the fire, asked me to read a passage about her mother's recipes. Vernon stared at the journal, Clara's handwriting on the cover. C. Calhoun, 1875. Why are you showing me this now? Ruth opened it to a marked page. Because of what's written here. Vernon read, April 12, 1876. Mary wrote from Omaha. Her baby girl was born 3 weeks ago. Clubfoot, poor thing, but the surgery went well. She named her Iris. I told Vernon we should bring them here once Mary's strong enough. This territory's no place to raise a child alone. Vernon's vision blurred. Mary, Clara's younger sister. He remembered her, quiet, sweet-tempered, married to a railroad man who died in a rail accident. He'd sent money once or twice, but they'd never visited. And then the letter stopped. Mary Calhoun Brennan, Ruth said quietly. That's your wife's maiden name, then her married name. Iris's mother. Vernon looked up. Where's Mary now? Dead. I asked around. Cholera outbreak in Omaha, winter of 81. Orphanage took Iris, but their records burned in a fire last year. Vernon felt something crack open in his chest. Iris wasn't some random child left at the depot. She was Clara's niece. His niece. Why didn't Clara tell me? Maybe she did. Maybe you forgot. Ruth's voice was gentle. You were gone a lot those last years. Cattle drives, market trips. Vernon closed the journal, his hands shaking. This proves she's family. No, Ruth said. It proves your wife knew about her, but without Mary's birth certificate, without marriage records, without legal proof, it's just a diary entry. Hearsay. Then what good is it? It's a start, but Pettigrew won't accept it. You need official documents. Vernon stood, paced to the window. Outside, the dark was absolute. No moon, no stars, just wind and cold. So I'm supposed to find records that don't exist? Or you fight them another way. How? Ruth hesitated. I don't know yet, but I know this. Pettigrew's been doing this for 2 years. 12 homesteads, Vernon. 12 families pushed off their land, and every one of them the land got resold within a month. Always to the same buyer, RC Railroad Investment Company. Vernon turned. He's working for the railroad. I can't prove it, but yes, I think so. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Vernon thought of Iris, asleep in the next room, thought of Clara, gone 3 years, thought of 22 years on this land, every fence post driven by his own hands. Pettigrew said 60 days, Vernon said. That gives me till the 1st of May. That's calving season, Ruth said. You'll be busy. I'm always busy. Ruth stood, gathered her shawl. At the door, she paused. Vernon, that diary entry, it mentions Clara wanted to bring them here. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why Iris ended up on that train. Vernon didn't answer, couldn't. After Ruth left, he sat at the table, staring at the diary, Clara's handwriting, neat and careful. He opened it to the last entry, dated 2 days before the fire. I dreamed of Iris last night. She was standing in a field of lavender, calling for her mother. I woke up crying. Vernon says I'm being foolish, that Mary's fine, but I can't shake the feeling something's wrong. Vernon closed the book. His throat felt tight. In the next room, Iris coughed once, then settled back into sleep. Pettigrew didn't know she was blood, but even if Vernon could prove it, Ruth was right. Without legal documents, it wouldn't matter. The law didn't care about diaries or dreams or dead sisters. It only cared about paper. Vernon rode into town 3 days later, Iris bundled in the wagon beside him. The girl had been asking questions about the ranch, about Clara, about why she couldn't remember coming here before. Vernon didn't have good answers, so he kept his responses short and focused on what needed doing. Doc Sawyer's office sat above the apothecary, a narrow staircase leading up from the street. The smell of camphor and iodine hung in the air. Vernon knocked, heard Doc's voice. It's open. Inside, the office was cramped but orderly. Shelves lined with jars and ledgers, a desk covered in papers, an examining table by the window. Doc looked up from his work, saw Iris, and smiled. How's the patient? Better, Vernon said. Cough's mostly gone. Doc gestured for Iris to sit on the table. He checked her breathing, looked at her throat, asked her to stick out her tongue. You're a strong one, he said. Most children, that pneumonia would have taken them. Iris swung her legs, watching him with curiosity. My mama said doctors smell like medicine. Doc chuckled. Your mama was right. He glanced at Vernon. Can I speak with you a moment? Alone? Vernon nodded. Iris, wait here. Don't touch anything. They stepped into the back room, where Doc kept his records. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled by year. Doc pulled open the one marked 1875, 1877, flipped through folders. After Ruth told me about the diary, Doc said. I started thinking. I delivered babies in Omaha for 2 years, 74 through 76. Worked at the clinic on Porter Street. He pulled out a folder, opened it. Kept every record. Vernon's pulse quickened. You delivered Iris? Not sure yet. Let me check. Doc ran his finger down a list of names, dates, notes written in tight script. He stopped. Here. Iris Brennan, born May 14, 1876. Mother, Mary Calhoun Brennan. Clubfoot surgery successful, discharge June 2nd. Vernon exhaled. That's her. Doc nodded slowly. It's proof she existed. Proof Mary was Clara's sister, same maiden name, but... He closed the folder. I'll need a judge's permission to present this in court. Medical records are confidential unless subpoenaed. Can you get permission? Judge Willis comes through on circuit. Won't be back till April. That's 2 months. I know. Doc's face was grim. Question is, can you hold off Pettigrew that long? Vernon didn't answer right away. He thought of the decree Pettigrew had read at the town meeting, the 60-day countdown, the way the man had smiled when he said Vernon's name. "I'll have to." Doc handed him the folder. "Take this, make a copy if you can. I'll testify when the time comes, but you need to be ready." Vernon tucked the folder inside his coat. "Why are you helping me, Doc?" Doc looked at him, his eyes tired. "Because I delivered that child. I held her when she was an hour old, and I told Mary she'd be fine. I'll be damned if I let some bureaucrat steal her family a second time." Back at the ranch, Vernon set Iris to learning chores. She was small but steady, and she listened when he explained things. He showed her how to gather eggs from the henhouse, how to scatter grain for the chickens, how to check the water trough for ice. She worked without complaint, her hands red from the cold, her breath white in the morning air. "Why's that iron so rusty?" she asked one afternoon, pointing to the corner of the barn. Vernon followed her gaze. The branding iron leaned against the wall, crusted with disuse. He'd forged it himself 20 years back. A simple design, the letters V and C inside a 5-pointed star. "That's the family brand," he said. "VC star. Means the cattle belong to us." Iris picked it up, tested its weight. "What's it for?" "Branding. When a calf's born, you heat the iron and press it to the hide. Leaves a mark that don't fade." "Does it hurt?" "For a moment, but it heals quick." She set the iron down carefully. "Do I get a brand?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "You said it means the cattle belong to you. Do I belong to you?" Vernon crouched down, looked her in the eye. "You're family, Iris. Family don't need brands." She considered this, then nodded. "Okay." From the fence line, Vernon heard a voice. "Saw that, Vernon." He turned. His neighbor, a rancher named Miller, sat on his horse, watching. Miller was in his 40s, weathered and quiet, the kind of man who kept to himself. "Saw what?" Vernon asked. "Girl learning your trade. That's family work." Vernon straightened. "She's learning to pull her weight." Miller nodded. "Good. Pettigrew's been asking around, wants to know if you're really keeping her or just playing church." "Tell him whatever you want." Miller touched his hat brim. "I'll tell him she's working. That's all I saw." He rode off without another word. Iris watched him go. "Who's Pettigrew?" "Nobody you need to worry about." But inside, Vernon was worrying plenty. Miller's words meant the gossip was spreading. People were watching, waiting to see what he'd do. He looked at Iris, her copper hair catching the weak February sun, her hands still clutching the egg basket. She'd found a bar of soap on the shelf earlier, lavender, the kind Clara used to make. "Can I use this?" she'd asked. Vernon's throat had tightened. "Yes." Now, the scent of lavender clung faintly to her coat. Clara's scent, her sister's scent. Vernon picked up the branding iron, felt its weight, cold metal, rough with rust. He'd need to clean it, reforge it before calving season. The thought settled in his mind, not urgent but present. Spring was coming, and with it, decisions that couldn't be delayed. Iris tugged his sleeve. "Can I help with the cows when the babies come?" Vernon looked down at her, this child who'd been thrown away, who hummed Clara's lullaby without knowing why, who asked questions that cut straight to the bone. "Yes," he said. "You can help." Behind them, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of thawing earth and distant rain. Winter wasn't done yet, but it was loosening its grip. Vernon just hoped 60 days would be enough. Mid-March came cold and mean. Vernon rode into town for supplies, leaving Iris with Ruth for the afternoon. The courthouse square was busier than usual. Wagons lined up at the mercantile, horses tied to the rail, people clustered in groups talking low. Then Vernon saw it. Nailed to the courthouse door, a poster the size of a saddle blanket, black ink on white paper, official county seal at the top, abandonment decree, notice of forfeiture review. Vernon dismounted, walked closer. His name was at the top of the list. Vernon Calhoun, Homestead Parcel 47B. Charges: no documented family continuity per Territorial Code 40412. 60-day notice expires May 1st, 1883. Failure to provide blood relation or legal adoption papers results in homestead forfeiture and county resale. Below his name were two others, widows he knew from church. People gathered behind him. Vernon heard boots on the boardwalk, the scrape of a match, low murmurs. Then Pettigrew's voice, smooth and loud. "Afternoon, Calhoun." Vernon turned. Pettigrew stood on the courthouse steps, flanked by two men Vernon didn't recognize, railroad types by the look of their coats. "Didn't think you'd post it public," Vernon said. Pettigrew smiled. Transparency's important. People got a right to know which homesteads are under review. That girl's my wife's niece. Then prove it. Pettigrew descended the steps, stopped 3 feet from Vernon. Birth records, marriage certificates, legal documentation, that's all the law requires. Vernon's jaw clenched. I'm working on it. You've got 6 weeks. After that, Pettigrew gestured to the poster. The land goes to auction. Marshall Cross stepped out of the crowd. He was a lean man, early 50s, with a gray mustache and eyes that missed nothing. Pettigrew, this seem right to you? Man works land for 22 years, suddenly he's got to prove his own family? Pettigrew's smile never wavered. I don't make the law, Marshall. I enforce it. Convenient how it's always widowers and spinsters you're enforcing it on. Those are the cases that require review. Pettigrew turned back to Vernon. Mr. Calhoun, if you'd like to avoid the public process, I'm authorized to negotiate. Sign the land over now, I'll drop the case. You'd even get a settlement, $500. Vernon's fists clenched. $500. For land worth 10 times that. I ain't signing nothing. Pettigrew shrugged. Your choice. But the clock's ticking. He walked past Vernon, his boots loud on the boardwalk. The crowd dispersed slowly. Marshall Cross stayed, arms folded. Vernon, you need legal help? Need documents I don't have. Then get them, or find another way. Cross's voice dropped. I don't trust Pettigrew. Never have. But my hands are tied unless I got proof he's breaking the law. Vernon nodded, climbed back on his horse. He rode to Ruth's boarding house, his thoughts churning. That night, Ruth burst into Vernon's cabin without knocking. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She held a folded paper. Vernon, you need to see this. He took the paper. It was a copy of the decree from the courthouse door, but at the bottom, below the county seal, was a signature line. Vernon Calhoun, acknowledging notice and waiving contestation rights. Below it, a signature. His name, in handwriting that looked almost right. Vernon stared. I never signed this. I know. This is forged. Ruth nodded. But it's notarized. County seal, witness signature, everything legal. Vernon's vision blurred with rage. He forged my signature. And if it's notarized, a judge might accept it, might say you had your chance to contest and chose not to. Vernon sat down hard, the paper crumpling in his fist. Iris was asleep in the next room. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. How many others? He asked quietly. What? How many other people did he do this to? Ruth hesitated. I don't know, but I can find out. Vernon looked at the charred homestead certificate on the mantel. Clara had died trying to save it from the fire. He'd carried her out of the flames, but she'd run back in for that paper. Proof of their life together, proof they'd built something that mattered. And now Pettigrew was trying to steal it with a forged signature. From the bedroom, Iris stirred. Vernon heard the bed frame creak, then her small voice. Uncle Vernon, are we leaving? The words stopped him cold. Uncle. She'd started calling him that last week. Hesitant at first, then more certain. He walked to the doorway. Iris sat up in bed, her copper hair tangled, her eyes wide. No, Vernon said. We're not leaving. I heard shouting. That was Miss Ruth. She's just worried, is all. Iris looked past him to where Ruth stood by the fire. Are you worried too? Vernon crouched by the bed. A little. But worrying don't solve problems. Working does. What kind of work? The kind that proves you belong here. Iris considered this. Do I belong here? Vernon felt something crack in his chest. Not break, crack, like ice on a spring river, letting the current through. Yes, he said. You belong here. Iris lay back down. Within minutes, her breathing evened out. Vernon returned to the main room. Ruth was staring at the forged decree, her face hard. If the law's broken, Vernon said quietly, then we fix it the old way. What's the old way? Witnesses, truth, people standing up when it counts. Ruth looked at him. You think people will stand up for you? I think some will, and that might be enough. Ruth folded the decree carefully. I'll start asking around. See who else Pettigrew did this to. If we can prove a pattern. Marshall might listen. Maybe. After Ruth left, Vernon stood at the window staring out at the dark. The ranch stretched beyond the glass. Barn, corral, fields that would green up in a few weeks. 22 years of work. Every fence post, every stone in the foundation, every acre cleared by his hands and Clara's. He thought of Iris, asleep in the next room, thought of Clara, gone 3 years, thought of Mary, Clara's sister, dying alone in Omaha while her daughter got sold to a rail company like livestock. Pettigrew thought he could steal this land with paperwork and a forged signature. He was wrong. Vernon walked to the mantel, picked up the charred homestead certificate. The edges were black, the ink faded, but the words were still legible. Vernon and Clara Calhoun, 160 acres, granted 1861. He set it back down, next to Clara's Bible and the rusty branding iron he'd brought in from the barn. The iron needed cleaning, needed reforging before calving season. He'd do it tomorrow. Because if the law said Iris wasn't family, then Vernon would prove it the way his father had taught him, by showing the work, by branding the calves, by standing in daylight and letting the whole town see what family looked like when it was earned, not just written on paper. Pettigrew had 60 days to enforce his decree. Vernon had 60 days to prove him wrong. He turned down the lamp, checked the fire, and sat in Clara's old rocking chair. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, the cabin settled into silence. In the dark, Vernon whispered, "I won't let him take it, Clara. I promise." The fire popped once, sending sparks up the chimney, and in the next room, Iris hummed softly in her sleep, Clara's lullaby, note for note, like she'd been singing it all her life. Ruth's boarding house kitchen smelled of fresh biscuits and lye soap. Vernon arrived before dawn, hat in hand, to find Ruth already awake, 3 townswomen sitting at the table with coffee cups. He recognized them. Mrs. Brenner, whose husband had died in a mining accident, Mrs. Yates, a spinster who ran the schoolhouse, and young Sarah Miller, the neighbor's daughter. Ruth gestured to an empty chair. "Sit. We've been talking." Vernon sat. The women watched him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Determination, maybe, or quiet anger. "After you left last night," Ruth said, "I started thinking. Pettigrew's been doing this for 2 years. 12 homesteads, all widows or widowers, all resold within a month." She pushed a piece of paper across the table. "I made a list." Vernon scanned the names. Some he knew, others were strangers. "My husband's name is on that list," Mrs. Brenner said quietly. "Lost our claim in '79. Pettigrew said we didn't have family continuity. I had 3 children, Vernon. 3, but they were all under 10, and he said that didn't count. Needed adults." "That's a damn lie," Vernon said. "It's the law, or how he interprets it." Mrs. Yates leaned forward. "We can't prove he forged anything on our cases. Too much time's passed. But we can testify about yours." Vernon frowned. "Testify to what?" "That Iris lives with you, that she works your ranch, that she's part of your household." Ruth tapped the table. "It's not blood-proof, but it shows intent. Judges respect community vouching. Won't hold up in court without documentation." "Maybe not," Ruth said. "But it'll show Pettigrew we're watching, that we're not afraid of him." Vernon looked at the women, tired eyes, worn hands, faces that had seen loss and kept going. "You'd risk that? Standing up against him?" Mrs. Brenner's voice was steel. "He took my land, Vernon. I got nothing left to lose." Ruth pulled out a stack of papers, already written in careful script. "Affidavits, witness statements. I need signatures." She handed one to each woman. "Says you've observed Iris Calhoun at Vernon's ranch, participating in family labor, residing as kin." Mrs. Yates signed without hesitation. So did Sarah Miller. Mrs. Brenner paused, pen hovering, then wrote her name in firm strokes. Ruth looked at Vernon. "I'll get more. 20, 30 if I can. Won't win your case, but it'll make Pettigrew sweat." Vernon's throat felt tight. "Why are you doing this?" "Because my husband believed in community," Ruth said quietly. "And because if we don't stand up now, we'll all lose our land eventually, one by one, till there's nothing left but railroad money and Pettigrew's smile." One of the women whispered, "My husband lost our claim to Pettigrew last year. I believe you, Vernon." Vernon nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the first light touched the eastern hills. Vernon rode home through cold air that smelled of thawing mud and distant rain. Spring was coming, slow but certain. At the ranch, he found Iris in the barn, trying to lift a hay bale twice her size. She'd dragged it halfway across the floor before giving up. "What are you doing?" Vernon asked. "Helping." She wiped her hands on her dress. "You said family pulls their weight." Vernon crouched beside the bale, showed her how to cut the twine and scatter the hay by armfuls instead. She watched, then copied his movements, her small hands working steadily. "Uncle Vernon, what's branding for?" He glanced at the iron, still leaning in the corner. "Told you, it marks the cattle." "But why?" "So everyone knows they're ours. So if they wander, people bring them back. So if someone tries to steal them, we got proof." Iris tilted her head. "Do people steal cows?" "Sometimes." "Do people steal land?" The question hit harder than it should have. Vernon straightened, brushed hay from his pants. "They try." "Is someone trying to steal ours?" Vernon looked at her, this 7-year-old girl with Clara's eyes and Mary's copper hair, standing in a barn that might not be his in 6 weeks. "Yes," he said, "but I'm not letting them." "How do you stop them?" "By showing them we're family, by doing the work, by proving it in front of witnesses." Iris nodded slowly, like she was working through a puzzle. "When do the baby cows come?" "Calving starts in April. First one's usually early May." "Can I help?" Vernon hesitated. Calving was hard work, bloody, exhausting, sometimes heartbreaking when a calf didn't make it. But he'd promised. "Yes, you can help." That afternoon they worked side by side, feeding chickens, checking fence posts, hauling water from the creek. The ice was breaking up, chunks floating downstream. The ground beneath their boots was no longer frozen solid. Vernon heard thunder in the distance, looked west, saw dark clouds building, spring storms, coming early. "We should head in," he said. Iris looked at the sky. "Is it going to rain?" "Likely." "Good. The garden needs it." Vernon paused. "What garden?" "The one Aunt Clara planted. You showed me where it was. All the flowers are dead, but they'll come back." Vernon's chest tightened. He had shown her weeks ago, pointed out the small plot near the house where Clara used to grow lavender and sage. He hadn't expected Iris to remember. "Yes," he said quietly. "They'll come back." As they walked to the cabin, the first drops began to fall. Cold rain that smelled of earth and new grass. By the time they reached the door, it was pouring. Inside, Vernon built up the fire, while Iris dried her hair with a towel. The rain drummed on the tin roof, steady and relentless. Vernon thought of Ruth and the women signing affidavits. Thought of Doc's medical records, locked in a cabinet and waiting for a judge. Thought of the branding iron in the barn, rusted but still whole. He had 3 weeks till May 1st. 3 weeks to turn witness statements and old records into something a court would accept. 3 weeks to teach Iris how to brand a calf in front of a town that would decide if she belonged. The rain fell harder. Vernon closed his eyes, listened to the rhythm. Outside, the creek was rising. Vernon needed supplies, flour, salt, lamp oil, and the general store was the only place to get them. He brought Iris along, partly because Ruth was busy with witness gathering, partly because he wanted the town to see her, wanted them to know she wasn't hiding. The store smelled of pickle brine and tobacco. The storekeeper, a man named Hobbs, nodded as Vernon entered. His wife was behind the counter, weighing out sugar for another customer. Iris wandered to the candy jars while Vernon gathered what he needed. Mrs. Hobbs watched the girl, then smiled. "She's got your wife's eyes, Vernon. Same color." "Clara's sister's child," Vernon said quietly. "I can see it. The hair, too. That copper color runs in families." Vernon paid for the supplies, counting out coins. As he reached for the flour sack, the door banged open. Silas Pettigrew walked in, his boots loud on the wood floor. The store went quiet. Pettigrew smiled, tipped his hat to Mrs. Hobbs. "Morning, everyone." His gaze landed on Vernon. "Calhoun, still wasting money on supplies?" Vernon picked up the flour sack. "Still got a roof to store them under." "For now." Pettigrew leaned against the counter, casual. "You know, I've been reviewing your case. Checked the county records twice. No adoption papers filed. No birth certificates linking that girl to your wife's family. Nothing. Working on it." "Working on what? Making up documents?" Pettigrew's voice rose just enough for everyone in the store to hear. "You forged your signature to waive contestation rights. Now you're stalling." Vernon's jaw clenched. "I never signed that paper." "Then prove it." Mrs. Hobbs cleared her throat. "Mr. Pettigrew, I've seen Vernon's signature. He signs the store ledger every time he buys on credit. That decree signature don't look the same to me." Pettigrew's smile tightened. "You an expert on handwriting, Mrs. Hobbs?" "No, but I got eyes." Hobbs stepped forward, opened the store ledger, flipped to Vernon's account. "Here, March 2nd, March 9th, and here's the decree copy Ruth showed me." He set them side by side. Don't match. Pettigrew glanced at the ledger, his expression unchanging. Witnesses won't save you, Calhoun. Only paper does. He turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him. The store stayed quiet for a moment. Then Mrs. Hobbs said softly, "We believe you, Vernon." Vernon nodded, his throat tight. He gathered his supplies and left, Iris following close behind. 2 days later, Marshal Cross sent word, "Come to my office." Vernon arrived at noon. The marshal's office was small, cluttered with wanted posters and filing cabinets. Cross sat behind his desk, a ledger open in front of him. "Sit," Cross said. Vernon sat. "What's this about?" "Been doing some digging. You said Pettigrew forged your signature, so I started looking at his other cases. 12 homesteads in 2 years, all pushed through fast. Too fast." Cross turned the ledger around. "Found this in the courthouse records room. Pettigrew's private ledger. He keeps it locked in his office safe, but the county clerk has a key." Vernon leaned forward. The ledger was filled with names, dates, and dollar amounts. He recognized some. Thomas Kimball, Ruth's husband, Benjamin Hollis, Samuel Turner. Next to each name was a notation. RC Railroad Investment Kyoko, $500. "What's RC Railroad?" Vernon asked. "Railroad Expansion Company. They've been buying up homesteads along the proposed rail corridor. Pettigrew's been feeding them land." Vernon's blood turned cold. "He's selling people's homes and pocketing the difference. County auctions the land for $200, railroad buys it for $500, Pettigrew takes the gap." Cross closed the ledger. "It's fraud, Vernon, clear as day." "Can you arrest him?" "I need more than this. Need witness testimony, need proof the signatures are forged, need a judge's order." Cross leaned back. "But I can build a case. If you prove that girl's your family publicly how?" "Territorial law says family continuity includes trade participation. If a child works a homestead's primary trade, branding cattle, milling grain, whatever, and it's witnessed by community members, that counts as family labor." Cross tapped the desk. "You got calving season starting soon?" "First calf's due late April. Then brand it, public ceremony, invite witnesses, have the girl hold the iron." Vernon frowned. "She's 7 years old." "I know, but if she can do it, if she can prove she's learning your trade, that's family continuity under the law. Combine that with Doc's medical records, Ruth's affidavits, and this," he tapped the ledger, "and I can arrest Pettigrew for fraud. Can you stop the May 1st deadline?" Cross shook his head. "Not without a judge's order, but if you make it to May 1st and prove family publicly, I can file charges the same day. Won't save your land retroactively, but it'll stop him from taking anyone else's." Vernon sat back, his mind racing. "You're saying the whole town needs to watch." "That's exactly what I'm saying. Make it so public, Pettigrew can't challenge it. Make it so obvious, even a territorial judge can't ignore it." Vernon thought of Iris, small hands gripping the branding iron, learning to hold it steady. Thought of the town gathered at his ranch, watching a 7-year-old girl burn a mark into a calf's hide. "She can do it," Vernon said quietly. "You sure?" "I'll teach her." Cross nodded. "Then we got a shot." He stood, offered his hand. "I don't like men who steal from widows and orphans, Vernon. Let's take him down." Vernon shook his hand, felt the weight of the moment settle in his chest. That evening, Doc Sawyer arrived at the ranch with a folder under his arm. "Heard from the marshal," he said, "about the plan." "And?" "I'm in." Doc set the folder on the table. "Got Iris's birth record, surgery notes, everything. Judge Willis arrives April 28th. I'll request permission to present medical evidence that day. That's 3 days before the deadline." "I know. Cutting it close. But if the marshal arrests Pettigrew on May 1st, the judge will have to review the case. Your ceremony gives him reason to pause the forfeiture." Vernon opened the folder, saw the neat handwriting. Iris Brennan, born May 14th, 1876. Mother, Mary Calhoun Brennan. Proof. Real, documented proof. "Why are you risking this, Doc?" Vernon asked. "You could lose your license if Pettigrew retaliates." Doc's face was grim. "Because I delivered that child. I held her when she was an hour old. I told her mother she'd be fine." He paused. "I'll be damned if some county clerk steals her family twice." After Doc left, Vernon sat at the table, staring at the birth record. Outside, the night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like seeds. He heard Iris moving in the next room, then her voice. "Uncle Vernon, can I ask you something?" "Come here." She padded out in her nightdress, bare feet on the cold floor. Vernon pulled her onto his lap. What is it? When I brand the calf, will it hurt? The calf? For a moment. But it heals. Will people be watching? Yes. Why? Vernon looked at her, this child who'd been thrown away and found, who carried Clara's blood and Mary's name. Because sometimes people need to see the truth to believe it. Iris nodded, her small face serious. I won't let my hand shake. I know you won't. She rested her head against his chest, and Vernon felt the weight of her trust. Absolute, unearned, terrifying. Outside, a coyote howled. The stars wheeled overhead, and, somewhere in town, Pettigrew was likely planning his next move. But Vernon had a plan too. May 1st was coming, and when it did, the whole territory would see what family looked like when it was earned in fire and witnessed in daylight. April 28th arrived cold and wrong. The sky hung low and gray, and by noon, snow was falling, thick, wet flakes that shouldn't exist this late in spring. Vernon stood on the porch, watching the storm build, feeling the temperature drop. A blizzard. 3 days before May 1st. He heard wagons on the road, neighbors heading somewhere in a hurry. The Millers passed first, their wagon loaded with supplies. Vernon raised his hand, expecting a wave back. They looked straight ahead, didn't slow down. 10 minutes later, the Johnsons came through. Same thing, eyes forward, no acknowledgement. Then the Brenners. Mrs. Brenner, who'd signed Ruth's affidavit, sat rigid in the wagon seat. Her son drove. When they passed Vernon's fence line, the boy turned his head away. Vernon felt something cold settle in his gut. Iris came out, wrapped in Clara's old shawl. Why won't they wave? Don't know. Are they mad at us? Vernon looked down at her, snow catching in her copper hair. They're scared. Of what? Of losing their own land if they side with me. Iris watched the wagons disappear into the white. That's not fair. No, Vernon said. It's not. By evening, the snow was a foot deep and still coming. Vernon built up the fire, made stew, tried not to think about the fact that no one had stopped. In the old days, before Pettigrew, before the decrees, neighbors sheltered together during storms, shared food, shared warmth, looked out for each other. Not anymore. Now they were all alone, watching their own backs, terrified the county would come for them next. Vernon stood at the window, his breath fogging the glass. Behind him, Iris sat by the fire, humming Clara's lullaby. Uncle Vernon, she said quietly, what if we can't do it? Can't do what? The branding. What if I mess up? Vernon turned. Iris looked small in the firelight, her face shadowed with worry. He crossed the room, crouched beside her chair. You won't mess up. But what if my hand shakes? What if I drop the iron? Then I'll steady your hand, and we'll do it together. Will people laugh? Vernon's throat tightened. No one's gonna laugh. Iris's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why do we have to prove we're family? Can't people just see it? Vernon didn't have a good answer. He pulled her into a hug, felt her small body trembling. Some people see what they want to see, he said quietly. Others see what's true. We just gotta make sure enough people see the truth. Outside, the wind howled. Snow piled against the windows. The cabin felt small and fragile, like it might blow away. Vernon held Iris until she stopped shaking, until her breathing evened out. Then he carried her to bed, tucked her in, and sat beside her until she fell asleep. When he returned to the main room, he looked at the branding iron leaning against the wall. Tomorrow, he'd take it to the blacksmith, get it cleaned, reforged, sharpened. Tomorrow, if the storm passed. April 29th dawned clear and bitter cold. The storm had blown through, leaving the world white and silent. Vernon saddled his horse, loaded the branding iron into a saddlebag, and rode to town. The blacksmith's shop sat at the edge of the main street, a low building with smoke rising from the forge. Inside, the air was thick with coal smoke and the smell of heated metal. The blacksmith, a man named Gareth, looked up from his work. Vernon, heard about your trouble? Need this cleaned and reforged. Vernon set the branding iron on the workbench. By tomorrow. Gareth examined it, running his thumb over the rusted edges. VC Star, your family brand. Yes. Heard you're doing a public ceremony. Whole town's talking about it. Vernon nodded. What are they saying? Gareth hesitated. Half think you're right to fight. Half think you're a fool. Pettigrew's been making noise. Says if people support you, he'll review their homesteads next. Vernon's jaw tightened. That's why no one stopped during the storm. That's why. Gareth set the iron in the forge, pumped the bellows. Flames roared up, red and gold. I'll have it ready by evening, no charge. I can pay. I know, but I won't take your money. Gareth looked at him, his face hard in the firelight. My father lost his land in Pennsylvania. Bank fraud. Took everything we had. I was 10 years old. He turned back to the forge. I know what it looks like when a man fights for what's his. And I'll be at your ranch tomorrow, Vernon. I'll witness. Vernon's throat felt tight. Appreciate it. He left the blacksmith shop and rode to the ranch, the cold biting through his coat. When he arrived, he found Iris in the barn, practicing her grip on a stick of firewood she'd shaped to match the iron's handle. Like this? She asked, holding it at an angle. Vernon adjusted her hands. Thumb here, fingers spread. Keep your wrist steady. She practiced the motion, lowering the stick to an invisible calf, holding it firm, then lifting it away, over and over, her face serious with concentration. When you press the iron, Vernon said, you gotta say the words. VC star, this is my family's mark. Iris repeated it. VC star, this is my family's mark. Louder, so everyone hears. VC star, this is my family's mark. Good. Now remember, the iron's gonna be hot. You'll feel the heat through the handle, even with a glove. Don't be scared of it. Just press firm and count to 3, then lift straight up. What if the calf moves? I'll hold it steady. You just focus on the iron. Iris nodded, gripped the stick tighter. Uncle Vernon, what happens if they say I'm not family, even after we do this? Vernon crouched down, looked her in the eye. Then we fight in court, and we keep fighting until they listen. But you said the law. The law's broken, Iris. But people ain't, not all of them. Some will stand with us, and that'll be enough. Iris studied his face, searching for doubt. Vernon made sure she didn't find any. Okay, she said finally. I'm ready. That evening, Vernon rode back to town and collected the branding iron from Gareth. It gleamed in the lamplight, cleaned and sharpened, the VC star clear and bold. Tomorrow morning, Gareth said. Sunrise. I'll be there. Vernon nodded, tucked the iron into his saddlebag, and rode home through the dark. The stars were bright overhead, the air smelled of wet earth and new grass, and somewhere in the distance a calf bawled, early eager, ready to be born. Vernon thought of Iris practicing her grip in the barn, thought of Ruth and her affidavits, thought of Doc's medical records and Marshall Cross's ledger. Tomorrow, they'd find out if any of it mattered. Tomorrow, the whole territory would watch a 7-year-old girl prove she belonged. And Pettigrew would either back down or double down. Vernon was betting on the latter. He touched his heels to the horse's flanks, urged her faster. The ranch lights appeared in the distance, warm and steady in the dark. Inside, Iris would be asleep by now, dreaming, maybe, of calves and branding irons in a life that wasn't hers by birth but by choice. Vernon rode through the gate, dismounted, and carried the branding iron into the barn. Tomorrow. Everything came down to tomorrow. May 1st arrived with a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Vernon woke before dawn, built the fire, made coffee strong enough to strip paint. Iris was already awake, sitting at the table in her best dress, Clara's old Sunday dress taken in at the waist and hemmed short. Couldn't sleep, she said. Vernon poured her milk, heated it over the stove. Nervous? A little. That's normal. They ate in silence, bread, butter, eggs from the henhouse. Outside, the first light touched the eastern hills. Vernon heard wagons on the road, voices carrying in the still air. People were coming. By the time Vernon and Iris reached the corral, 30 people had gathered. Ruth stood near the fence, her arms folded. Doc Sawyer was beside her, holding his medical folder. Gareth the blacksmith leaned against a post, his face set. Mrs. Hobbs from the general store, Mrs. Yates from the schoolhouse. Neighbors Vernon knew, and some he didn't. And at the back of the crowd, arms crossed and expression cold, Silas Pettigrew. Next to him stood a man in a deputy's coat, hand resting on his gun belt. Marshall Cross stood separate from both groups, his face unreadable. Vernon led the first calf to the branding post, a sturdy beam sunk deep in the ground. The calf was 3 days old, still wobbly on its legs. Vernon tied it firm but gentle, the way his father had taught him. He turned to the crowd. Appreciate you all coming. This is a family matter, but territorial law says it needs witnesses. He gestured to Iris. This is Iris, my wife's niece. She's learning the trade, same as any child learns their family's work. Pettigrew's voice cut through the morning air. This is fraud, Calhoun. That girl's not blood family. Doc Sawyer stepped forward. Actually, she is. He opened his folder, held up a document. Birth record. Iris Brennan, born May 14, 1876. Mother, Mary Calhoun Brennan. I delivered her myself in Omaha. The crowd murmured. Pettigrew's face darkened. That don't prove relation to Calhoun. Doc pulled out another paper. Mary Calhoun Brennan, maiden name Calhoun, sister to Clara Calhoun, Vernon's late wife. I have medical records proving both women were treated by the same physician in Pennsylvania, documented sisters. Ruth stepped forward, holding a stack of papers. And I have 30 affidavits from townspeople who've witnessed Iris living at Vernon's ranch, working his land, participating in family labor. Pettigrew turned to the deputy. This is a circus. Shut it down. The deputy looked uncertain. Marshal Cross stepped between them. Let them finish. Pettigrew's jaw clenched. You're overstepping, Marshal. Am I? Or am I watching a family prove what you said they couldn't? Vernon picked up the branding iron from where it lay heating in a small forge fire Gareth had built. The metal glowed orange-red. He carried it to Iris, knelt beside her. Remember what I taught you. Thumb here, fingers spread, press firm, and count to 3. Iris nodded. Her hands were steady. Vernon placed the iron in her grip, his hand over hers. Together, they lowered it to the calf's hide. The smell of burning hair and hide filled the air. The calf bellowed once, then fell silent. Iris's voice rang clear. VC Star, this is my family's mark. They held it for 3 seconds, then lifted. The brand was perfect. Clean lines, VC inside a 5-pointed star. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some clapped, others stared, stunned. Pettigrew lunged forward. That's not legal continuity. That's a child doing tricks. Marshal Cross blocked him, one hand on his chest. Not another step. You can't stop this, Cross. The law says family continuity includes trade participation witnessed by community. I count 30 witnesses. You count different? Pettigrew's face went red. I'll have your badge for this. Maybe, but right now you're under arrest. The crowd went silent. Pettigrew stared. On what charge? Fraud, forgery, bribery. Marshal Cross pulled a pair of iron cuffs from his belt. Found your ledger, Pettigrew. RC Railroad Investment Company. 12 homesteads sold under the table. $500 apiece. Pettigrew stepped back. That's private business. It's fraud. You forged abandonment certificates, including Vernon's signature. You took bribes from railroad investors, and you lied to a territorial court. Cross snapped the cuffs on Pettigrew's wrists. You're done. The deputy hesitated, then stepped aside. The crowd watched in silence as Cross led Pettigrew toward a waiting wagon. Pettigrew twisted back, his voice desperate. This won't hold. I'll have lawyers. Save it for the judge. Cross shoved him into the wagon, locked the gate. Vernon stood in the center of the corral, Iris beside him, the branding iron still warm in his hand. The crowd slowly dispersed, some stopping to shake his hand, others nodding as they left. Ruth approached, her eyes bright. You did it. We did it, Vernon said. Couldn't have done it without you. Doc clapped him on the shoulder. Judge Willis arrives this afternoon. I'll present the medical records then. But with Pettigrew arrested and that ceremony witnessed, your homestead's safe. Vernon looked down at Iris. She was staring at the brand on the calf, her expression a mix of pride and exhaustion. You did good, he said quietly. My hand didn't shake. No, it didn't. That afternoon, Vernon and Iris rode to the courthouse. Judge Willis had set up in the main chamber, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. Marshal Cross stood to one side, Pettigrew in cuffs beside him. The judge reviewed the documents, Doc's medical records, Ruth's affidavits, the marshal's ledger evidence. He looked at Pettigrew. You forged this man's signature? Pettigrew said nothing. The judge turned to Vernon. Mr. Calhoun, I've reviewed the witness statements from this morning's ceremony. 30 townspeople observed your niece participating in family trade. That constitutes family continuity under Territorial Code Section 412. Vernon exhaled. Furthermore, the judge continued, the medical records presented by Dr. Sawyer prove blood relation. Iris Brennan is the daughter of Mary Calhoun Brennan, sister to your late wife. He stamped a document. Adoption approved. Your homestead claim is upheld. The gavel fell. Vernon felt Iris's hand slip into his. He squeezed it gently. Judge Willis looked at Pettigrew. As for you, 12 counts of fraud, forgery, and accepting bribes. You'll be remanded to territorial prison pending trial. I'm recommending 5 years and full restitution to the 12 families you defrauded." Pettigrew's face went white. Marshal Cross led him out of the chamber. The judge stood, gathered his papers. "Mr. Calhoun, your homestead certificate will be refiled with Iris listed as legal kin and adopted daughter. You're free to go." Vernon nodded, his throat too tight for words. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm. Spring had fully arrived. Meadowlarks singing, grass greening, the smell of earth and growth everywhere. Ruth met them on the courthouse steps. "Heard the verdict. Congratulations." "Couldn't have done it without you." "You're family now," Ruth said, looking at Iris. "Real family, the kind that chooses each other." Iris looked up at Vernon. "Can we go home now, Uncle Vernon?" The word hit him square in the chest. Home. Not his home or the ranch, just home. "Yes," Vernon said. "We can go home." They climbed into the wagon, Iris sitting close beside him. As they rode out of town, Vernon saw people waving from porches and storefronts, the same people who'd avoided him during the storm. Now they waved, nodded, called out congratulations. Fear did that to people. Made them retreat, made them protect themselves first. But when one person stood up, others found their courage. Vernon thought of Gareth the blacksmith standing witness, thought of Mrs. Hobbs comparing signatures, thought of Ruth organizing affidavits and Doc risking his license and Marshal Cross refusing to back down. One person couldn't fight alone, but a community, a real community, could move mountains. They rode through the gate of the ranch, and Iris jumped down before the wagon fully stopped. She ran to the barn, to the calf they'd branded that morning. "It's healing already," she called back. "The mark's perfect." Vernon climbed down slowly, his body heavy with exhaustion and relief. He walked to the barn, stood beside Iris. The VC Star brand was clear and clean, the calf nursed from its mother, unbothered. "Uncle Vernon," Iris said, "can we plant flowers on Aunt Clara's grave tomorrow?" Vernon looked down at her. "What kind of flowers?" "Lavender, like the soap." Vernon's vision blurred. He nodded. "Yes, we can do that." Iris smiled, then ran toward the house. Vernon followed more slowly, the weight of the day settling into his bones. Inside, he built up the fire, set water to boil for coffee. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and the faint scent of lavender from Iris's coat, still hanging by the door. He sat in Clara's rocking chair, closed his eyes, and whispered, "We made it, Clara. She's ours now, legal and true." The fire crackled. Outside, the evening birds began their songs, and, for the first time in 3 years, Vernon Calhoun felt like he'd finally come home. The next morning, Vernon and Iris rode to the courthouse one final time. Judge Willis had called them in to witness the official paperwork, the corrected land registry, the adoption certificate, the restitution orders for Pettigrew's victims. The courthouse smelled of ink and old wood. Marshal Cross stood by the window, arms folded. Doc Sawyer sat in the gallery, hat in his lap. Ruth arrived moments after Vernon, breathing hard like she'd run all the way. Judge Willis spread the documents across his desk. "Mr. Pettigrew has been sentenced, 5 years in territorial prison. He'll also pay restitution to 12 families whose homesteads were fraudulently seized." Ruth's hand went to her mouth. "My husband's land will be returned to you, Mrs. Kimball. All 12 properties are being restored to their rightful owners or heirs." The judge signed the final document with a flourish. "The land registry has been corrected. Mr. Calhoun, your homestead certificate now lists Iris Calhoun as blood kin and legal adopted daughter." He pushed the certificate across the desk. Vernon picked it up, saw his name and Clara's, and below them, in fresh ink, Iris Calhoun, daughter by adoption, May 1st, 1883. "It's official," the judge said. "She's yours, and the land is yours. No one can take either from you now." Vernon's throat was too tight to speak. He nodded once. Iris stood on tiptoe, trying to see the paper. Vernon lifted her so she could read it. Her finger traced her name. "That's me." "That's you." The judge stood. "One more thing. Mrs. Kimball, I understand you gathered witness statements." Ruth nodded. 30 signatures. That kind of community organizing prevented further fraud. The territorial governor wants to thank you personally." He handed her an envelope. "He's also appointed a new land registrar, someone without ties to railroad money." Ruth took the envelope, her hands shaking. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Don't thank me. Thank yourselves. You stood up when it mattered." Outside, the sun was bright and warm. Spring had settled in fully now, Wildflowers blooming along the courthouse steps, the air soft and smelling of new grass. Ruth hugged Vernon, then Iris. You did it. You both did it. Couldn't have done it without you, Vernon said. We're family now, Ruth said simply, the kind that chooses each other. Doc Sawyer shook Vernon's hand. Bring Iris by next week. Want to check her lungs, make sure that pneumonia's fully cleared. Will do. Marshall Cross approached last. Pettigrew's locked up tight, and I'll be keeping an eye on the new registrar. Make sure this don't happen again. Vernon nodded. Appreciate everything you did, Marshall. Just doing my job, but... Cross glanced at Iris. Glad I could do it right this time. They rode home in silence, the wagon creaking, the horses moving steady and slow. Iris leaned against Vernon's side, her eyes half closed in the warm sun. Uncle Vernon, she said drowsily, are we really safe now? Yes, we're safe. Forever? Forever. She smiled, closed her eyes completely. That afternoon they walked to Clara's grave, a small plot on the hill behind the ranch, marked with a simple wooden cross. The grave was overgrown with winter-dead grass and weeds. Iris carried a basket with lavender cuttings Ruth had given them. Vernon brought a spade. They worked side by side, clearing the weeds, turning the soil. The earth was soft and warm, easy to work. Iris planted the lavender carefully, patting the dirt around each stem. Will they grow? She asked. Yes, lavender's hardy, comes back every year. Iris sat back on her heels, looking at the grave. Tell me about Aunt Clara. Vernon set down the spade. He'd avoided this conversation for weeks, unsure how to talk about a woman Iris had never met but carried in her blood. She was your mother's sister, he began, older by 4 years, stubborn, kind, made the best bread in the territory. He smiled. She used to sing while she worked. That lullaby you hum, that was hers. Iris looked up. I know that song? You've been humming it since the day I found you. Your mother must have taught you. Iris touched the lavender, her fingers gentle on the leaves. I don't remember her. My mama. That's all right. You were young. Do you think she wanted me? The question hit Vernon hard. He knelt beside Iris, took her hand. Yes, I think she wanted you very much. I think she loved you so much it scared her. And when she died, I think she made sure you'd end up somewhere safe. Here? Here. Iris leaned against him. I'm glad I came here. So am I. They sat in silence, the sun warm on their backs, the lavender already starting to smell faintly sweet. Below them, the ranch spread out, barn, corral, fields beginning to green. Vernon's life for 22 years, now theirs together. From the corral came the sound of the branded calf calling for its mother. Iris straightened. Can I go see? Yes, just stay inside the fence. She ran down the hill, her copper hair catching the light. Vernon watched her go, then turned back to the grave. She's got your eyes, Clara, he said quietly. And your sister's stubbornness. She's going to be all right. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of earth and growth. Vernon stood, picked up the spade, and walked down the hill. At the corral, Iris had climbed onto the fence, watching the calf nurse. She waved when she saw him. Vernon waved back. That evening, they ate dinner on the porch. Bread, cheese, cold chicken from Ruth. The sky turned orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made everything look possible. Iris sat on the porch steps, humming Clara's lullaby. Vernon sat in the rocking chair, whittling a piece of wood, a toy horse for Iris, though he hadn't told her yet. Uncle Vernon, she said, when did the next baby cows come? Few weeks. We'll have 10, maybe 12 calves this season. Can I help with all of them? Everyone. Iris smiled, hugged her knees. Good. The sun dropped below the hills. Stars began to appear, faint at first, then brighter. Vernon set down his knife, looked at the girl on his porch. This child who'd been thrown away and found, who'd learned to hold a branding iron steady, who'd proven in front of 30 witnesses that family wasn't just blood. It was choice. It was work. It was standing in the fire and saying, this is mine, and I'm keeping it. Iris, Vernon said, come here a minute. She climbed onto his lap, settled against his chest. Vernon wrapped his arms around her, felt her small heartbeat steady and strong. I want you to know something, he said. You're wanted. You hear me? You're wanted, and you're loved, and you belong here. Iris looked up at him, her eyes, Clara's eyes, bright in the fading light. I know. Good. Don't ever forget it. I won't. They sat together as the stars came out, as the night sounds began, crickets, distant coyotes, the soft lowing of cattle settling down. The air smelled of lavender and warm earth and wood smoke. Vernon thought of the note pinned to Iris's coat that frozen January morning. One word, unwanted. He thought of how wrong that word had been. How a single piece of paper, a single cruel act, could be undone by 30 witnesses and a branding iron and a man who refused to walk away. The land was theirs. The family was real. The past was settled. And the future, well, the future was whatever they made it. Vernon closed his eyes, held Iris close, and let the night settle around them like a blanket. They were home. They were family. And that was enough. 20 years later, I still think about that morning at the rail depot. The frost on the door handle. The weight of a child who should have died, but didn't. The note that said unwanted, like a person could be summed up in one word. Pettigrew thought land was just dirt and dollars. Didn't understand that land holds memory. Clara's hands planted that first garden. Her sister's child saved it from men who'd never worked a day of honest labor in their lives. That's legacy. Some folks asked why I risked everything for one orphan girl. Told them, she wasn't an orphan once I knew her name. And even before I knew her name, she was somebody's daughter, somebody's niece, somebody worth saving. The law said I needed paper to prove family. But family ain't what's written on certificates. It's what's earned in fire and witnessed in daylight. It's a 7-year-old girl holding a branding iron steady while a whole town watches. It's 30 people signing their names when they could have stayed silent. It's choosing to stand when sitting would have been easier. Iris is grown now, married, 3 children of her own. Still comes every May Day to brand the new calves. Her oldest, Clara, named for the aunt she never met, holds the iron the same way I taught Iris, steady, sure, like she was born to it. The lavender blooms thick on that hillside grave now. You can smell it from the porch on warm evenings. Same scent Iris's coat carried that frozen January morning. Same scent Clara used to wear. I'm old, land's still mine, still Calhoun land. When I'm gone, it'll be Iris's, then Clara's, then whoever comes after. That's what unwanted becomes when someone gives a damn. Last spring, Iris brought her grandchildren to the barn, showed them the VC Star brand on the wall, told them about the day she proved family ain't blood alone. It's who you'd walk through a blizzard for, who you'd stand beside when the law says stand down, who you'd burn your name next to. I reckon that's enough. The land remembers, the brand holds. And when the lavender blooms, each May, I know Clara's watching. Know she's proud of what that unwanted child became. A daughter, a mother, a keeper of the land, family.